Welcome, everybody, to the Draft Savages NFL Draft Podcast, part of the Football Savages Network. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, both my co-hosts, Justice Moscated, live from his grow house. Justice, what's up?
If you say whatever it is, whatever you guys need to say to not get me fired, that's where I'm at. Pretty good. I mean, it's raining in Oregon, but it's like my one day off that I've had probably since the 1st of April, so I'm happy.
And Justin Higdon. Justin, how are you?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm ready for we're a week away. We've got some of the hottest of hot takes rolling in every day. We've got some good mock draft action, so I'm ready for it to be over, but I'm also excited.
And you've kind of opened up what we're going to start with tonight, and that's this mock draft that just went down between two of the heavyweights of the NFL draft world, and that's Todd McShay and Mel Kiper giving us their takes on what's going to happen in the first round. I guess the biggest surprise was Vic Beasley didn't get drafted in the first round, and Justice, he's like the top force player, right? On the board. How does that even make sense?
I mean, if he's not going in the first round, I mean, there's really two ways. I mean, one of it is that he's kind of an undersized guy and he has short arms. I think some teams are willing to let a guy be small as long as he has longer arms, but I believe he only has it's either 31 or 32-inch arms, pretty small. Very low percentage for edge rusher, or percentile for edge rusher. The other option would be that teams think he's on a cycle. I haven't been able to confirm that at all, so that's just wild speculation on my part. Throwing any journalistic credibility out the window.
Which we're okay with on this podcast, by the way.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm in a growing house, right? I'm in a growing room. But so that's really interesting because we had all these tweets. I think even the guys who trained him tweeted it out. I think it was sent out by Rotoworld on one of Josh's blurbs. Shout outs to Josh. That he got bigger and faster at the same time. That typically doesn't happen. But I mean, we have no confirmation on that. But if he's gonna slip all the way to the second round to Jacksonville, which is where the insider mock had him going, that just be crazy to me.
Justin, you're also pretty high on Beasley. How does he fall out of the first round with so many needy teams looking for a pass rusher?
It kind of goes along with what we talked about a few weeks ago. I think there's just the way people are slotting certain picks, the way people value certain players. Are people going to value some of these offensive linemen that maybe aren't worth a first round pick? Are they being valued by teams that need offensive linemen as first round picks? We're hearing about running backs, a couple of running backs being valued as first round picks, including Todd Gurley, who I've seen as high as third overall, which is crazy to me because as we all know, he's got a torn ACL, and I know he was tweets earlier this week said he was medically cleared. That's very, very misleading. He's on track with his rehab. He's not getting on the field anytime soon. He's hoping to be on the field for training camp, but that would still be a pretty quick recovery, and I don't know, if you want him on the field. So at that early, that soon. So I think, maybe we as the public, we are trying to guess how these teams are valuing players that we wouldn't value as highly, or maybe people are hearing things from insider sources telling them that guys like Danny Shelton are going to go 7th overall, or a guy 5 cornerbacks are going to go in the first round. That's one I heard today. So if all of these things happen, it's the perfect storm that knocks the best player in the draft out for some either unknown reason or speculative reason. Now, that's great for whoever's picking in the second round. I guess if Jacksonville gets Vic Beasley in the second round, everybody in that town's going to be ecstatic, and they're going to come away with like one of the best steals that we can think of, at least on paper, at least at this point.
You mentioned kind of guys getting pushed down. I think that's something that we saw last year with Teddy Bridgewater. It wasn't about the fact that the NFL didn't like him. It's that you have there's more than 10 teams, but you had 10 teams that were willing to pull the trigger on a quarterback in round one. And then you also had, but then you have like those fits outside of Cleveland, good call there, Justin, and the Browns, passing on Teddy. I mean, the Cardinals were never going to draft Teddy Bridgewater. Like, he's the anti-Bruce Arians quarterback. It wasn't going to happen. But you have other teams that needed quarterbacks that passed, I shouldn't say needed, but you had a couple teams that needed a quarterback and passed. But it wasn't like, 30 teams passed on Teddy Bridgewater. And it's kind of similar to what's going to happen if Vic Beasley does fall. You have, as Justin stated, you have a lot of teams that are going to draft for need. The Kansas City Chiefs have Tamba Hali, Justin Houston, and they just drafted Dee Ford. Can they really afford to pick Vic Beasley at 18? I mean, the BPA is a fun myth to talk about, but it's not necessarily the truth or something that happens all the time. So that's kind of what happens is there's run on positions which push down guys that deserve to be drafted higher. And that could happen to Beasley. Who knows here? Any other like hot takes from that mock draft that you saw, Justice?
Gurley going high is kind of an odd one because the thing about Gurley to me, Jacksonville at 3, no, like that I don't believe that at all. That doesn't pass the BS test anywhere close to me. The one thing that I would think though is if there was like a chaos situation, if for some reason, because to me Washington is kind of the wild card pick. Like I have no idea where they're gonna end up drafting. But if they end up taking a guy like Beasley, Dupree goes 6th overall to the Jets, and Dante Fowler ends up being either 3rd or 4th overall. I could see the Falcons sitting there and thinking, all right, that pick's probably. I've talked to Andrew Parsons about this. That pick probably ends up being either Gurley or Brandon Scherf. To be totally honest, so that's the one place where I could see Gurley going really high, but it would have to be a complete chaos situation for the Falcons. And because of that, I guess you'd say fear of an edge rusher not being there, I absolutely can see the Falcons moving up to 3rd overall, to be totally honest. I mean, we're talking about a team that almost traded up for Nick Matthews last season to secure their guy, their quote-unquote guy. They've traded up for Julio Jones in the past. They have a huge need at their Leo position and not really that auto spot. That auto spot is already taken up by Brooks Reed. So the only really pass rushing position that they need addressed now is Leo, and that's really Fowler Dupree, and I think Dupree ends up going 6th overall. So you end up saying, okay, well maybe they can move up for Fowler, who Quinn has a history with and recruited to the University of Florida. There's just so many things going on there that I could totally see, the second worst team as far as, regarding sacks in last season's draft, moving up to the 3rd overall spot and taking a guy that they have history with when this front office has been aggressive in the past.
I saw, I think it was, I can't remember where the mock was, but Gurley going like 9 somewhere.
That was today. That was in this one.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody said it, like, the Giants have Andre Williams, say what you will about him, the guy that was in Oakland that's now there, I can't even remember his name.
Jennings.
And then they just picked up Vereen or Ridley, one of the two, I can't remember. One of those New England running backs that are pretty good. Yeah, Gurley is probably going to be better than all of those guys, but from a capital standpoint, just of like roster capital, can you pick a running back at 9 when you have 3 quality NFL running backs already on your roster, Justin?
You can if you want to make a mistake, especially when you're talking about one who might start the season on the pup list. But this is one of the issues. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But I just have a really hard time spending a first-round pick, let alone a top 10 pick, on a running back who's got a torn ACL right now. You don't have any idea. You have some, good, there's some good words from the doctor telling you that he's on track, but you really don't know how a guy's going to come back from an injury like that. And this is a player at a position who's reliant on explosive lower body strength. There's so much that can go wrong with recovery from ACLs, and even a player who comes back full strength a lot of times is rusty the first season back. So is Gurley going to go in the first round? It really sounds like he's going to, but I just don't think that a team who's picking in the top 10 can really afford that kind of gamble. I just feel like that's the kind of thing that ends up setting teams back for a while, because let's say the Giants make that pick, or Atlanta makes that pick and takes Gurley at 8 or 9, and he's not ready for the start of the season, and they've got to go with some of these like secondary running backs 6, 7, 8 games into the season, and by that time, your season might be over. You might not even want to activate Gurley off that pup list, and at that point, you've redshirted a player, and I just don't believe in that strategy from an NFL standpoint. There's too much at stake. Guys lose their jobs after a year or two. I don't think GMs or team presidents, coaches should make that kind of gamble, even if it's a situation like Atlanta where Quinn is in his first year as coach.
The one thing that I'd say is, if, like I said, it has to be a chaos situation for Atlanta to end up doing that. And then some people have talked about Miami. I don't know how much I buy into Miami. I think probably the earliest spot that we see Gurley coming off the board is probably San Diego at 17, just because there's so much that. So yeah, I mean, if he doesn't go to Atlanta, I could see him slipping, I guess you'd say, into the middle of the first round.
We ended last show with Eric Galco kind of giving us some rumors and some inside information that he's heard. Let's pick up where we left off, and that's the 16th pick with the Houston Texans. Unfortunately, not a lot of people like to talk about the Texans. As a Cardinals fan and a Browns fan, Justin and I know how that goes. Justice, you're a jerk. You're a Packers fan, so your team's always talked about. When you look at the Texans, I think the hottest rumor that I saw was like a month ago, and it was about Green Beckham going there. But as far as the Texans go, it's not something that moves the meter. So you don't get a ton of rumors coming out of their camp or about them. But it seems like all signs point to that they're going to address a pass rusher again. Or try to. Whitney Merciless, I think it was 2 years ago. They lost Brooks Reed, as Justice talked about earlier, to Atlanta. Have you heard anything on them, or have you heard anything about what they're looking at doing, Justice?
No, but the one tip off that I had was that teams may be looking at them because they're in such an odd spot, because they don't really have massive needs outside of pass rusher because of the microfracture surgery that Jadeveon Clowney had. So people are thinking, all right, that might be like the landing spot for a guy like Shane Ray, right? But if they are sold on Clowney being able to recover from that is like a prime trade-up spot to snag Gurley. That's what I was told. That everyone knows that 17 is San Diego, and they're not going to lose that pick when if they move to number 2 to get Mariota. So that'd be like we're going to hop over San Diego to make sure that we get Gurley. But other than that, like for them specifically, I hadn't heard anything other than pass rusher. But all of that depends on how much they value that medical on Jadeveon Clowney. And we've heard it's been going good, but like you look at the history of microfracture surgery, and it might be time to cut ties with a generational talent after one season. Like that's how bad that injury is.
Yeah, that surgery is basically the kiss of death for every player that's received it so far. So, I don't know. Like you said, he'll get this year, but after this year, it could be time to go. Justin, when you look at the Texans and just their roster and how they're shaped, they need a quarterback still, unless you believe in the Ryan Mallett, Brian Hoyer, Bill O'Brien reunion here. But they're not ever linked to Mariota at all. Is that just because he doesn't fit O'Brien's mold? Is he kind of, in that Bruce Arians sect where they don't fit the mold, so we're not even going to talk about him there?
I think it's kind of like a situation where I don't know that anybody realistically thinks that Mariota is going to be there for them, even if they thought that, even if they wanted to pull the trigger on something like that. I don't know that he would even be there. They'll ever have that option. So I know way back, probably before New Year's, we were talking about Brett Hundley, and I mentioned the Texans as a spot where I would like to see him land. So that could be an option that they look at maybe in the second round. I don't think they would be that team to pull the trigger on Hundley in the first round. And as much as I'd love to see Hundley get drafted in the first round, just to see the reaction to it, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. I haven't heard any rumblings about it. So I look back at this McShay-Kiper draft, and they've got the Texans taking Philip Dorsett at 16. And if I'm looking at this correctly, that would make him the 5th receiver off the board at the 16th pick. And then they have Jalen Strong going 2 picks later. So that's 6 receivers that they have going off the board in the first 18 picks. That is like a fantasy dynasty draft to me. I don't see any realistic way that happens. But and I don't even, like last year's receiver class was so great. I like this one too, probably almost as much. But it still just seems like a crazy amount of receivers. So the Texans, they're a great mystery to me. I like what Justice said. That seems like a great trade-up spot, and I think that Bill O'Brien, coming from that Belichick camp, from that school of thought, is a guy who's probably willing to move back and accumulate picks and try and stockpile and make moves. So I like that as a trade-up spot. I don't really see anything obvious that they're going to
do. We hit on Gurley at 17, Justice. He's got company. You're good. We hit on 17, or Gurley at 17. Justin. But now, everybody's speculating, and I'll get Justice's take on this on a second, but everybody's speculating that the Chargers aren't going to make that pick at 17, or they're going to make that pick while also having the second pick. Are there any other instances here that even we're talking about, or is it just the Chargers are going to pick Mariota and then either have that 17th pick still, or they're going to have to trade it to get Mariota?
I can't tell whether or not to take these Rivers trade rumors seriously. I almost feel like it's a way for Tennessee to try and get Cleveland to up the ante on their trade offer to move up. I think Pauline reported that the Titans asked for the 12th, 19th, and 43rd pick from Cleveland, and Cleveland said no. So I'm just still not 100% buying why a guy like Phillip Rivers this late in his career, who's not being forced out, is going to kind of engineer this trade to Tennessee, which doesn't have a roster that's ready to win, even with a better quarterback. So now I don't know what San Diego is going to do. I know Kiper and McShay have Lael Collins mocked to them at 17, and you guys know how I feel about Lael Collins. I think that he's being very overrated. But so maybe they're looking at another offensive lineman. Maybe they're looking at maybe that could be like some kind of crazy surprise pick, like Donovan Smith from Penn State, who's picking up some steam after we talked about him as a kind of metric superstar. Yeah.
Justice, sorry. What are you hearing about Mariota? Is he going to be a Charger, or is it going to be somebody else that the Titans are just waiting for the right deal?
I think he ends up being a Charger. And what's happened over the past 24 hours in Vegas, kind of swings that way too. I know I tweeted it out earlier, because I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast with Barnwell, and they were talking about they were going through the draft odds on Sportsbook. So I was like, he brought up that Mariota to San Diego was a 15-1 odd, and I was like, what? So I ended up looking last night, and it was pulled off the board, and I was like, okay. So obviously that line must have adjusted. And then this morning I go on, and it's a 5-2 odds. So I mean that line has swung completely. And the thing about, I mean it's offshore betting, so it's not necessarily Vegas, but just being aware of how gambling kind of works is if you're gonna make sucker bets, Vegas will just take your sucker bets. I mean their job isn't to necessarily make the line even on both sides, especially on bets like this where it's not like a point spread or something like that, right? So I mean I had heard that like there's legitimate like flames to Rivers being moved for the second pick, and then probably something else is what they said is like it's going to take more than just the second pick. And part of it too doesn't even come down to like from a logical standpoint, you probably shouldn't trade the second overall pick and assets when you could pick a future franchise quarterback at number 2, and that aging quarterback also needs a new deal. The issue is Ken Wisenhunt is 3-25 in his last 28 games. So it's like over a stretch that is roughly equivalent to 2 seasons, he's winning about 10% of his games. So to say like, I mean, he should have been fired last year. That team was obviously going through a wild transition defensively, and they had to play a 6th-round rookie quarterback. And they publicly kind of said, Mettenberger might not be the guy. I mean, they said that if they took Mariota is the starter day one and things like that publicly. So, I mean, we don't often get quarterback news in a way where it's like, hey, this isn't our guy, and then also we're going to stick with him. Usually when that happens, a change happens. So to me, I mean, I feel pretty confident that the Chargers are going to move to the second overall pick and end up getting Marcus Mariota. This pick could be Todd Gurley. If a team does take Todd Gurley before them, I could see it being like a Cameron Irving, because Cameron Irving is so good at center, and I think they went through like 4 different centers last season, and that's really when you saw the Chargers started off very hot early in the year, and then they kind of tumbled off as that offensive line just kind of got destroyed, to be totally honest. So I could see it being offensive line. I mean, there's other spots on the offensive line that could be addressed, but right now they have an absolute hole at center, and the one guy that I can point to and say, this guy is going to be a day 1 center starter, in the NFL is Cameron Irving, and maybe that's a little too high considering value for the position, but I mean, when you drafted Mariota first, I think you could take in a guy who can make that transition a little easier, especially when, you talk to offensive line guys, they'll say left tackle is the most important position on the offensive line, and then right after that is center, just because you have to have the acclimation with the quarterback and things, and we saw that kind of go south for San Diego last season.
So there's a scenario here where San Diego trades Rivers, like almost, I mean, for that number 2 pick without having to give up the 17th pick. That just sounds like a brutally bad deal for Tennessee. Even if they get a future, I mean, even if they get a future first rounder 2016, you're thinking, San Diego is a team that's probably not going to wind up in the top 10 next year. So that just seems like a really, really dumb move for Tennessee, especially when Cleveland probably would do the trade up to number 2 for the 12th and 19th pick, and then maybe a future pick or like a 3rd rounder or something. That seems like be more the way to go for a rebuilding team. But I guess, like you said, if Ken Wisenhunt has like 1 year to save his ass, then he could try and bank on it with Rivers. But I just think Rivers would be miserable in that situation.
Right, a little bit of it has to do with Wisenhunt kind of reviving Rivers too, in my opinion. And then Rivers kind of Eric Stone talked about this with Sigmund Bloom on the Couch podcast, and he was talking about how Rivers kind of like came into the league with old man game. Like you could totally like Rivers game like isn't really something that's gonna diminish greatly like with like arm strength or anything like that. Like he's kind of gonna go down that Peyton Manning route where it's gonna like slowly diminish, but like he never really won with like arm strength or like foot speed, right? It's more of like upstairs type stuff. So that's gonna be in play, and then yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, I really think this is a like, ooh, let's not get fired. Like I think that's the kind of move that's being made right now.
And that usually gets guys fired.
Well, and you have to remember with Wiz and Hunt, he's terrible at developing quarterbacks. I mean, he's never developed a quarterback. He was successful with Ben Roethlisberger, but you have to remember that offense revolved around the running game in Pittsburgh. He was not good with Matt Leinart in Arizona. I mean, he ran a 2-quarterback system in Arizona and still won 8 games somehow because of Kurt Warner. And then, but when he has a quarterback that's good, his system's really good. So it makes sense that he would want a guy like Phillip Rivers who's been successful in his system already and could do things. And like you guys said, Rivers is, 33, 34, and he's never had a serious injury. So you're talking probably 3 or 4 years. So he's right in that Warner, Cardinals type of stretch. It's just, for like anybody that likes Marcus Mariota's sake, you probably don't want him going to Tennessee. Like that's probably one of the worst possible things that could happen. So the Chiefs, why does everybody mock the Chiefs a wide receiver? Like, am I missing something? I know all our Chiefs bres, or whatever they call themselves, hate wide receivers because their quarterback hates wide receivers. But why are they consistently mocked a first-round wide receiver? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Justice, you can start on this one.
The other option, too, is like, well, we can mock him a offensive tackle, and want to know what Chiefs fans aren't big fans of? First-round offensive tackles right now.
Go figure.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at – some people have talked about them looking at an edge player, but then again, I mean, you're deciding to move past Justin Houston, and 2, you're probably giving up on Dee Ford, who was your last year's first-round pick if you're taking an edge player in the first round. You could probably look at corner, and this is probably around the range where the run on corners is going to start. So that to me makes sense if they're going to go for a boundary guy, and that's assuming that they're not so like a lot of these team needs are based on like how do they feel about their own roster. So we don't know how they feel about Phillip Gaines, who was their 3rd-round pick last year. I was a pretty big fan of Phillip Gaines last year. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but I mean, it's hard to look at them and be like, had no touchdowns from any receiver on the receiving last season. Yeah, okay, you guys are gonna pass over a pass catcher. To me, even a guy like I'm probably a little higher on a guy like Funchess than everyone else. Like Funchess there wouldn't make a lot of sense to me, but he's a guy that I look to as more of like a Brandon Marshall type than as like a move tight end. And I know everyone does not see it that way. But to me, that'd be the type of guy I'd look at. I mean, they just had Rodney Hudson leave. They have Cush now playing center for them, or slated to play center for them currently. So if they feel good about Cush, maybe they stick with that. But if they don't, maybe they could be a team that picks up Cameron Irving because they have an obvious center need after their center went to an in-division rival and got a $10 million per year contract. They're kind of an odd spot for me to pin down, but receiver really is just like the easiest pick to make for them.
See, and maybe it's because I don't know enough about Cush, so like I can completely admit that and be okay with that. But when I look at the roster, I look at it and go, I would take Cam Irving. Like I know that's not like a sexy pick, but I would take, if you think he's the best center, I would take the best center in the draft. Like I don't know, I wrote something for ASUDevils.com, which is like a Rivals website or one of the Rivals offshoot websites, and like they asked me to write like best fit, worst fit for all the ASU prospects, and one of the worst fits to me for like Jalen Strong is the Kansas City Chiefs. Like I just don't like the idea of him having to go there because I think they'll put him outside at like X and then expect him to put up wide receiver 1 numbers right away, and I don't think any wide receiver is putting up wide receiver 1 numbers in Kansas City anyways. So I don't know. It's just like I just don't like that idea, and I think McShay made that pick. I could be wrong, but like one of them made that pick of Strong to the Chiefs there.
Yeah, that is the pick on this mock. And what I want to say about the Chiefs here, Seth, is I would like you to tweet out that you believe they should move on from Cush at center so that you can get a reply from his father, who's a known internet troll, and who a couple years ago when Cush was in the draft was pretty much trolling everybody's rankings, asking them why Cush wasn't in the top 5 of the centers that year. So shout out to Eric Cush's dad, but to their credit, both he and his father, he ended up, he's a pretty well thought of guy. So hats off. They were right. Should have had Cush on the rankings.
We talked about the Browns last time, so we're going to go with the team that doesn't have the 19th pick, but is the team that used to own the 19th pick before they decided that Sammy Watkins was worth that, and that's the Buffalo Bills. Everything that I've read and heard, and Justice, you can probably confirm this, is they're really in the market for a round 2 quarterback. Or is that just a lot of smoke to see if they can get somebody to trade up in round 2 and maybe get some extra draft picks?
Man, I have no idea. Like, I don't get the love for Bryce Petty, but like if Bryce Petty is sitting there in the 2nd round, I wouldn't be surprised if Green Bay took him. I wouldn't be surprised if Denver took him. He seems like a commodity that people seem to like for some reason, and people are like willing to redshirt him. But like, man, I don't know what the hell that team's doing. I mean, Tyrod Taylor might win a quarterback job in 2015. Like, I don't know. I'll pass on this one, man. I don't know what the Bills are gonna do.
Well, and the quarterback outside of Petty that's getting a lot of talk is Garrett Grayson, and I know
like Brett Hundley died or something. Like I don't know what happened to Brett Hundley.
well, and I know that we're all like semi fans of Grayson. I think we all think he's like a top 6 quarterback in this class, but after the first 2, it's kind of like, I mean, it is a crapshoot, but. I mean, in the 2nd round, Garrett Grayson, like I don't know, Justin, does that make sense to you? I mean, the Browns will probably take him at 19. So,
great, Grayson to me, he's still my favorite senior quarterback. But I'm with you guys. Like, what happened to Brett Hundley? What did he do to everybody to make? I mean, he's one of the most hated guys for what I can't even figure out what the reason is. But he's considered. I've seen people tell me that Brandon Bridge is better than Hundley. I just want to throw hands with him.
That's not true. That's not true, and I call him Air Canada. No.
But let's talk about the other quarterback that's getting some run, and it was Joel Klatt from Fox Sports. I think it was last week, so you guys might have already touched on this, but he had Sean Mannion in his top 50, and so is this real buzz, or is this kind of like a Tom Savage thing where a guy like Mannion is getting 2nd round talk, really is not going to go to the 4th round? Is this a Savage or Ryan Nassib situation where a guy is being hyped by 1 or 2 analysts and then he falls into the 4th round? I don't even think I would draft Sean Mannion. Petty to me is like a midday 3 guy. Grayson, who I like, I could see him getting picked in the latter stages of the 3rd round. But if any of these teams are going to take Garrett Grayson, Bryce Petty, we've talked about this, and this is something that RotoViz has done research on. I know Ben Albright's done research on this. Grayson and Petty both are going to be 24 years old at the end of May. the track record for 24-year-old rookie quarterbacks, especially when they're considered when they try and start them right off the bat, it's terrible. And check that out, Google that, because this track record is not good. I wouldn't want either one of those guys starting day one. My best hope would be a situation where they could come in like Justice was alluding to. They get drafted by a team that already has an established quarterback, get a chance to sit there, be groomed for a couple of years, and then maybe be traded to another team at the age of 26, 27, and kind of take it from there. But I wouldn't want either one of these senior quarterbacks, and especially not Mannion, coming in and trying to start for my team. Again, that's a good recipe for getting yourself fired.
And the one thing about Mannion that I'll say is, so Pauline confirmed that he was third on a lot of teams' boards. He was I believe, 8th overall on one of the scouting, the NFL scouting. What do you even call them?
Preseason
I don't know.
list?
Was it Blusto?
I don't even want to say too much because apparently the NFL as an organization is coming down and suing some people who released some of the info on this. So y'all didn't hear that from me. But Mannion was ranked ahead of Beasley, and he was 8th overall on one of the scouting services. So I could see it being real, but he's a developmental player who can be Mike Glennon, and what are we doing here?
Just trade for Mike Glennon.
Yeah. The NFL is so dumb, man. Bad teams stay bad.
The Eagles, speaking of bad teams, wait, no, they're not bad yet. The Eagles, they're another team that's kind of boring in this rumors ideal here because it's Mariota is the only rumor, right? There's no other takes on this right now, Justin.
Well, they don't need a quarterback anymore because they signed Tim Tebow. So we know that they're set there. They've got Tebow, Sanchez, Sam Bradford. One thing I want to tell any Eagles fans that are listening, or if anybody that's listening that knows some Eagle fans, just please try to get them used to the fact that Sam Bradford is going to be your 2015 starting quarterback on that team. I think this Mariota trade stuff with them is a pipe dream. I know some people are still hanging on to it. I don't see any way they can maneuver and get into an area where that's going to be possible for them. So then, I think judging from some of the Eagles guys that I interact with and that I follow along with, you might be looking at a cornerback here. And I know the guys that I'm seeing they're looking at are, Byron Jones, maybe Eric Rowe, one of these taller cornerbacks, one of these taller, longer cornerbacks that can, step right in and play early. So, yeah, there's a lot of, kind of Chip's going to do something crazy type of talk right now. But I think Chip's already been, really at work doing kind of interesting roster moves. So I'm not sure that this first-round pick's going to be as wild as people think. I think it's going to be more measured, and they're probably going to target one of those tall corners if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly.
Yeah, it seems like the two guys that people keep talking about to Philadelphia are Byron Jones from Connecticut and then Jalen Collins of LSU. And then the other wild card would be Jake Fisher, the tackle out of Oregon. It seems like those are the three that people seem to be keen on being Philadelphia picks.
So if Efo didn't get hurt, we'd basically put Efo there, right? That's
No. No, Brandon Boykin is on the bench. Brandon Boykin is coming off the bench as a slot corner. No. Chip these long guys. Brandon Boykin is sending off frustrating tweets on a weekly basis about people calling him just a slot cornerback, and he cannot wait to leave Philadelphia.
So when you look at the Bengals, they're another kind of boring team because not a lot of stuff comes out about them pre-draft. We had Joe Goodberry on, and he kind of hit on the fact that the Bengals kind of have a way of doing things, and Lyle Collins is kind of the guy that fit that metric. I've seen a lot of mock drafts where they do go round one offensive lineman. Is that going to kind of be what you see there from everything? Because, outside of that, I don't know. They like these long pass rushers, and I don't know if one's going to be there at 21. What do you think, Justice?
Yeah, unless they fall in love with a guy like Danielle Hunter. But then again, I mean, they did just bring back in Michael Johnson. So, I mean, it's hard to say that they're going to invest in another defensive end unless they're trying to move past Carlos Dunlap anytime soon. What I would say is both of their tackles are on contract years, and if you're looking at how the Bengals have acted historically, they are probably the cheapest team in the NFL. Remember, like Steve Young, like was drafted and did not go to Cincinnati because they would not give him his money and ended up playing in the USFL. That's how deeply entrenched this whole Mike Brown being cheap thing is. So, I mean, if you have two tackles on in contract years and you're in a position where you can get a developmental guard who could swing back out to tackle, like a player like Lyle Collins or even a guy like TJ Clemmings, even though I'm not a big fan of TJ Clemmings' game because I think he's a right tackle only type guy, at least in that situation. So, I mean, if there were a year where they were like, oh, okay, now we're looking toward the future and we're going to save some money, then that's when they're going to do it at the position. And we've seen this with like Darqueze Dennard too, right? Like Darqueze Dennard was like the fourth cornerback last season. So I mean, the Bengals usually look forward when they're drafting because they have that whole. They're efficient with their money. I guess we should say that.
A guy that is climbing up boards, as you talked about a little bit earlier, and we talked about him a couple weeks ago on our metrics show. Donovan Smith, does he fit the metrics? I haven't even looked at it, but would he fit the metrics? He kind of reminds me of Andre Smith, right? Like
Donovan Smith's his metrics were really good, so that kind of doesn't fit what the Bengals have done on their offensive line. They've kind of gone more with a kind of slower-footed guy, and that to me, I could definitely see Donovan Smith being the pick here. Because they don't have to be slaves to these styles. Like they might not even dig as deep as we do into the numbers and just look at the build. And in that case, Donovan Smith. I know Greg Gabriel had talked about Donovan Smith as a player he projects to guard. So it could be a situation like Justis said. They start Donovan Smith at guard, they kick him out to tackle when one of these free agent tackles leave. Another guy who kind of fits that mold that I don't really like, not nearly this early, is Eric Flowers. And that's the guy who Kuiper McShay had mocked to the Bengals today. When Joe Goodberry was on, he was pretty adamant that he thought that La'el Collins was the top player on their board. So if Collins is still there at 21, then I would probably bet money, figuratively speaking, because I'm not allowed to bet money, but I would figuratively bet money that La'el Collins would be the pick if he's still sitting there at 21.
Yeah, and shouts to whoever's going to take Eric Flowers because he's Marshall Newhouse, man. He got beat up by Randy Gregory, and Randy Gregory was like high and like 220 pounds. So just gave him those hands, man. Like, God bless you, whoever takes Eric Flowers, because I had to deal with that for like 3 years.
And that's what I was saying a couple weeks ago. Like, why is Eric Flowers any different than like Corey Robinson, who you're going to be able to get in the 4th or 5th round? And that's me liking Corey Robinson and me not liking Eric Flowers.
The Steelers, nobody ever knows what they're going to do, but apparently they're in the market for a corner this year. So based on the way they have drafted lately, I'm assuming they're just going to take Trey Waynes because none of the draft community likes him. So that's got to mean that they're going to go Trey Waynes, right? Like it's Jarvis Jones and then Trey Waynes.
Well, like we talked about when Kurt Popejoy was on, they swung full circle, like did a 180, going from Jarvis Jones, who is just like a dud athlete, to Ryan Shazier last year. So I find them unpredictable. And the other thing I would say about Pittsburgh is that we think like the draft community seems to think they're going to take a cornerback every year, and every year they don't. So this is for Pittsburgh. I kind of think that they're going to sit there and wait and take whatever pass rusher falls into their lap. And it could be Randy Gregory if teams are scared off by all the marijuana stuff. That's a pick that I think could happen, and it would scare the hell out of me as a guy who follows the Cleveland Browns, because I could see that being the magic potion that turns Randy Gregory into an All-Pro, because I really like Randy Gregory's game, and the only thing that would scare me is just memories of like Josh Gordon.
What about Landon Collins? Is he on the forefront with the Troy Polamalu retirement, or are they going to look like elsewhere with that, Justice?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm just not a fan of Landon Collins, I guess, this early. I think he can play too high, and I think he could drop in the box, but I think he's a liability if you're like trying to play him deep without another guy next to him. The way that roster is shaped, they might have that guy on the roster already. To me, we say this every year, but I think this is finally like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and we're just like, all right, just take a corner. Like there's going to be a corner run right where you're drafting. I mean, you're not gonna get like the top corner off the board, but you're gonna get like one of like the mid-range second tier guys. Just go for one of those guys. Just take Marcus Peters. Like you guys are like a family community and like all of that. This guy had issues with his coach, but like Charles Woodson even like Charles. I mean, Green Bay's kind of like a small little place, so you could keep things down. But Charles Woodson, when he came to Green Bay, didn't have the greatest relationship with that coaching staff. But when you win, you can like make through it. Marcus Peters can kind of be that, Charles Woodson. And if there's anything that Pittsburgh needs, it's that.
Peters going to Pittsburgh would be another one that would just make me want to cry, because I think I love Marcus Peters as a prospect. I think, under a lot of circumstances, if he hadn't been kicked off the team, then he'd be in more top 10 discussions. And I kind of don't understand. I kind of don't see what other people are seeing with Kevin Johnson and Byron Jones to put him in front of Marcus Peters. I think Peters is a great player. Really, yeah, nobody plays the ball in this class better than he does, I think. And if Pittsburgh lands a guy like if Pittsburgh lands a guy like Peters or Randy Gregory because everyone else is scared off, then more power to him.
For the Lions, we've seen a lot of talk about running backs at 23. Even here locally, some people were talking, for those that don't know, in Arizona, I'm assuming everybody knows, but some people were talking about that the Cardinals would have to jump in front of the Lions to get a running back, like the running back they desired, like if Todd Gurley fell or Melvin Gordon, if that so inclines them. I don't know why, but that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I don't know what your thought on that is, Justin. The other one that obviously is getting a lot of steam is defensive tackle with the loss of Ndamukong Suh. If Malcolm Brown was to fall there, does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, Malcolm Brown makes a lot of sense to me, because he's more that type that they lost. I see Eddie Goldman mocked there sometimes, and that makes me cringe, because Eddie Goldman is just it doesn't seem like a fit, and he's not a very good athlete, and it would be like replacing Sue with a straight nose tackle, and I don't think that works.
The thing. Like not Goldman, which one of them is playing 3-tech, and you just traded for Nada, and you're probably going to like give him a little extension. So yeah. I don't really understand that one at all.
No, and I know like some people will say that if a Lael Collins or one of these other linemen that we've talked about is sitting there, that could be an option for them. Just today I was reading that the Browns might have Melvin Gordon on the board as their best player available at 19, so that could erase that type of player. And I really think Detroit would be really good if they could sit back and wait into the second round and end up with a guy like Duke Johnson or Amir Abdullah instead of spending that first-round pick on a running back. So I think Malcolm Brown will be a great pick for them. If he's gone, like if Cleveland takes him at 19, then they'll have to look elsewhere. And then maybe they could take a player like Eric Armstead, or maybe even a player like Mario Edwards Jr., who has been getting just some like first round buzz. and who I think is going to be a better pro than collegiate. I think Edwards is a player. His father played in the pros, and I just have this sneaky feeling that his pops gave him some advice and told him, save some for the paycheck, because when I watched him play against Greg Robinson in the national championship game 2 years ago, he was unstoppable.
When you look at the Arizona Cardinals, basically everything that I've read this offseason is that it's not if they win the Super Bowl, but by how much. So when you have a roster that complete, how do you address a perceived need when you don't have any, like this roster's constructed?
Well,
oh, sorry. I was reading one of the articles that was written on the Cardinals fan site. My bad. When you look at this, one of the things I've heard about recently is their desire to get really athletic in the secondary. You have a freak in Patrick Peterson. You have a freak in Dejon Buchanan, who they drafted last year. And I'm going to get to their pick in a second. I was looking at Arif Hassan's work on the I don't know on his consensus big board thing, and Buchanan was the second most overdrafted on that consensus big board. The number one guy was Jawan James, and they only were like 2 spots apart. And so here's what I'll say. If this had been a week ago or even 2 weeks ago, I would guess that this pick was going to be Byron Jones, by the fact that he was an athletic freak who most people saw as like a day 2 corner. But now that everybody's basically mocking him at like 20 or 22, I don't know if he'll even get to 24 at this point. So I think what the Cardinals are going to do is I think they're going to try to find an edge rusher. Obviously, they're going to hope like Randy Gregory falls, because I'm just hopeful that Shane Ray's not the pick. Yeah, me and Andrew Parsons will have a party if that's the pick, I guess. But yeah, I mean, you look at it. Maybe they're the ones that leaked the Shane Ray foot information, so they could draft him. I don't know, but if this was a week ago, I would have said that Byron Jones is the pick, because he fits their like metrics that they like in the secondary, and then they do tend to overdraft athletes. Like Jonathan Cooper wasn't the 7th ranked prospect, and obviously Dejon Buchanan was a mid-50s prospect. So I would have said Byron Jones, but I think he's getting more love now. So you're probably looking at a guy. I don't know. I don't know who they're going to go with. I'm just going to be upset about it, I'm assuming.
What about Eric Rowe? Nobody talks about Eric Rowe really blowing up the combine too, because Byron Jones did him that much better. But Rowe's combine was phenomenal, and a lot of people see that versatility that it seems to me like the Cardinals kind of value in their players, like a guy who can line up in different spots for them. And I'm really, really high on Eric Rowe. I think he's a first-round pick, and I only have like 18 first-round grades. So what would you think about that, Seth, just to throw him in there at corner and see? I know some people like him at safety, but I think he's a corner. I think he'd be a good one.
Yeah, and I think that's another guy that I should have thought about before I went on this rant, because I like Rowe better than Jones personally, so that's probably why I didn't even think about it.
You don't want to jinx it.
No, but that he's another guy that kind of fits that ideal that they want to get really long and athletic in the back or in the defensive backfield. So Rowe's another guy that kind of fits that ideal. I'm interested to see if they stick with that big body edge player. Shouts to force players and Preston Smith and O'Diggy. I can't remember his name ever. So, but yeah, both of those guys, fit their mold of player. If you look at what they like in terms of that size and the ability to play outside linebacker and then kick down inside on pass rushing downs if they need to. So, yeah, both those guys make sense. I don't, it's a week away, and really, I don't think outside of the fact that they'll draft a wide receiver somewhere, I don't know what they're going to do. So I don't think they'll draft a wide receiver early unless they like are in love with Philip Dorsett or Devin Smith. But they always try to go that day two, early day three wide receiver route. So I'm pretty much set in on Tyler Lockett and Trey McBride, like you and I have talked about before, Justin. So. If you guys want to add anything on the Cardinals, other than the fact that it's going to be weird watching them go undefeated, you can feel free.
The only thing that I'll say about Eric Rowe is I agree with you guys that I think some of the reason that he's undervalued is because a lot of people look at him as a safety, to be honest. And the way that the market for safety and cornerback goes, I think it's probably impossible that Eric Rowe is drafted and on day one he's being thought of as a safety. I think if nothing else, he's going to get a shot at cornerback first.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I really cringe when I see a player like Jalen Collins mocked in a first round ahead of Eric Rowe. Jalen Collins had 10 starts at LSU. And just wasn't nearly as productive as Rowe was as far as getting his hands on the ball, pass breakups, and interceptions. Collins just, to me, he's a stiffer guy. He's inexperienced, and Rowe is a player who has been around, has positional versatility, and I'm with you. The way people value corners these days, I don't know why we would put a guy like that at free safety when he can play corner.
We had Matt Harmon on Reception Perception. I think we have to say that every time I say his name. So Matt Harmon on the show to talk about the Panthers and what they, what he thought they were going to do. They're another team that's kind of locked into this wide receiver or offensive line picks. But Tony Pauline, I think it was, came out and said that they've talked a lot to Shaq Thompson. Which is interesting because
more coverage linebackers.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like no other team has as good of that position already filled as the Panthers. Is that redundant, or are they just trying to be like so good at that thing that they don't, at coverage linebackers that they don't have to worry about addressing cornerback, which needs work, and maybe edge rusher, which probably needs some work. Justice.
Yeah, the way they use their linebackers is really weird when you break it down to like assignments, because it actually, like, their linebackers are so good in coverage that it makes it really easier for their secondary, which is not usually how the NFL works. So if they added a guy like Shaq Thompson, I mean, I guess that makes sense. Shaq Thompson is a guy that I think that the New England Patriots at the end of the first round would be looking at for that same reason. Other than that, I'm not sure if I believe any team in the first round will really look at him. I mean, even as a Packers fan who's picking at 30, and we'll get into this, and they have a linebacker need, I'm not sure he would be high on their board. If I'm them, I mean, you kind of just got to go best tackle available, and if a tackle starts slipping, like, you trade your ass up.
When you look at, like, DJ Humphries and Eric Flowers there, I like Humphries more than I like Flowers. Yeah, exactly. That was kind of my point. Like, if Pete falls to like 17, don't you have to go up at that point, Justin?
Yeah.
If you like Andrus Pete, I guess, but I think that's I just hope Andrus Pete goes in the top, like 7 or 8 picks, so that I don't have to worry about the Browns drafting him, because I just think that this guy is just. I know Eric Stoner was talking about this. He really likes Pete because of his recovery ability, and even Eric was wondering the other day, is he overvaluing Pete for his recovery ability? Because that tells you that he's getting beat from the jump, and then he has to make up for lost ground. Can he do that against NFL pass rushers? That scares the hell out of me, and that's the thing that I hate. And I replied to Eric, and I told him, like, that is what really turns me off about Pete, because he strikes me as the type of guy who gets beat a couple times, and then he just kind of gets down on himself. And I don't want a player that I have to have a coach dedicated to kicking his ass and making him care and not be a sad sack out there. I think Pete's that kind of player. I hope he proves me wrong. I know he favorites everybody's tweets and then says things like, everybody has an opinion. I'd rather him say, like, you're full of crap. I'm going to be awesome. But he just seems like he's playing patty cake out there. And if they want to trade up for a guy like that, then, I guess go ahead. But I'd rather have, in this scenario we're talking about, between Pete, Eric Flowers, DJ Humphries, give me Humphries 7 days a week.
The Ravens, first off, somebody asked us if they can draft Green Beckham, and I think all three of us have said before, but it's no. I just don't think they can at this point. But the Ravens are being linked to running backs like crazy. Like every single update you see on the Ravens is they had this running back in or that running back. Is this, if for some reason Gurley and Gordon kind of fall, is this where the run starts, or could this be a surprise pick? I know Jay Ajayi's only going to play for like 3 games in his entire career, based off what the Twitter doctors have told me. But could a surprise first round pick like Tevin Coleman or something be the pick here, Justice?
I'm looking at this roster, and when you say, hey, Joe Flacco, what's the way he wins? Okay, it's the deep ball. And you look at what receivers they have, and it's a aged Steve Smith, a Marlon Brown, and then that slot receiver from, they picked him up last year. I'm spacing out on his name.
Mike Campanaro?
Yep, Mike Campanaro, the slot receiver that they drafted in like the 6th round last season. Who's catching the ball deep there? And if you don't have, to me, this is where like a guy like Philip Dorsett or Devin Smith comes off the board just because of their deep threat. I'm not huge fans into their game because I think they're semi-limited. But if they're ever going to be high on a board, it's going to be the Ravens' deep passing game, who has a massive need at needing a guy that goes just runs a 9 route and catches those deep balls. And what's really odd is I've said this before, but McGinn, who writes for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, he is the best guy as far as like sources, like league sources go, as far as like newspaper writers are. And he had like Philip Dorsett as like his 5th receiver and like a surefire first-round pick. And usually when McGinn writes things, they kind of happen. Like he had Ha Clinton Dick slipping in the 1st round last year and all sorts of things like that. So generally, like he's probably one of the guys where if I read him saying a source told me this, I'm willing to believe that as fact. And if teams believe that like Philip Dorsett is like the that type of receiver and is a lot to be in the 1st round, then I'm willing. Jeez, I can't even speak English. No hablo inglés. I'm willing to say that like a player like him would be a possibility for a pick that high.
I think it was Pete Prisco, right, that's been saying for a couple weeks that Dorsett's going to go round 1. So that makes sense. Devin Smith and Philip Dorsett. I know a lot of people like Devin Smith as more than just that 9 route guy right now. So I'm not saying that's all he is, but I think Smith and Dorsett, if they are at 27, both of those could make sense. Or 26, sorry. The Cowboys, Justin, were allegedly the team that flagged Shane Ray for his foot issues. Is that a ploy, or is that sincere in your opinion?
I don't know. The Cowboys, they just like Jerry Jones just reminds me of like Jerry Jones and Jimmy Haslam remind me of like Yosemite Sam. Like they're just some like wild man out there just shooting guns in the air and but really I think Jerry Jones is a savvy guy, and I could see him leaking out some kind of info like that. But this morning we heard that Shane Ray had this like debilitating turf toe that was gonna possibly need surgery, and by the afternoon Ian Rappaport was reporting that he needed to put his foot up on ottoman and ice it while he plays some video games. So, I don't like Shane Ray that early. They could be trying to play some games to get him there, but I kind of think that's like a real long shot that teams can do that and really hope that it actually works for them. So maybe this is where you see a team pull the trigger on a guy like Eli Harold, who I know Justice would take like 2 days later. But and I'm not a huge Eli Harold fan either. But if they really want a pass rusher, at this point they're going to the top rushers are going to be thinned out. Maybe they get a Diggy there because maybe teams are scared off by the hip injury. You never know with Dallas. They could be players in some trades too. And one of these days, I know people are always thinking like maybe Dallas takes a quarterback to groom behind Romo because you never know when Romo's going to be in traction from all the back injuries. But, I just don't see that happening this year. That could still be down the road. But Dallas is just one of those teams that we just love to watch because they seem like just last year, according to Jerry, he was ready to turn the card in for Manziel and had to be tackled so that he could draft Zach Martin.
Man, Sean Lee's about to tear his ACL trying to wake up Johnny Manziel, and then like Adrian Peterson's gonna be down there too. I can't wait. I cannot wait for that.
That's right. Maybe this pick goes to Minnesota for Adrian Peterson.
I'll mention real quick that they're tied to every single running back like in this draft. The Ravens and Cowboys. If Gurley and Gordon somehow fall past like 24 in the Cardinals, I really think that 26 and 27 are both just going to be running back selections, and everybody's going to be like, oh, look, they're back at, they're back at first round, talents and stuff like that. So the Broncos, Justice, is this to set up for Peyton's last ride, or is this to set up to move on from Peyton, in your opinion?
I mean, the earliest I could see him go for a quarterback is in the second round, and I think it'd be Bryce Petty. In the first round, though, and I know Eric Galco has written that before in one of his like league sources pieces. I think in the first round, the guys that they're probably gonna end up getting tied to when you like talk to people is probably guys like Clemmings and guys like Eric Flowers, who are kind of, you hope they're Orlando Franklin because they kind of need help at guard and things like that. But I'm not a big fan of either one of them. I think Clemmings. The thing about Clemmings is, you say, okay, he's raw, and you're just like, he's a tackle, but he's raw, so we'll just move him inside. And that's not really how that works, because inside is much quicker. When you're in a phone booth, you have to do things a lot better in the short area game. And with his sloppy feet, I don't think he's going to do well in a phone booth. I think he's a right tackle prospect who can be very good at right tackle, but he has to be developed. So there's kind of like, you got to kind of throw him into the fire at right tackle. And then there's Eric Flowers, who, like I said, I'm not a big fan. I mean, he reminds me so much of Marshall Newhouse that I just can't get over it. Like, that gif is just consistently playing in my head of just Randy Gregory just beating him up.
The other name that's been kind of linked to the Broncos is Benardrick McKinney. So I know they lost a couple of linebackers, so that would make sense there too. I know not everybody's a fan of McKinney, so that may not happen, but Colts, Justin, can they spend another first round pick on a running back?
No, I love this Colts pick because the Colts fans are already terrified, but that the pick's going to be Demarius Randall. He's gaining so much buzz, and he could slip into that first round because people don't see this safety class as being deep. And I think Randall reminds people kind of a Jimmy Ward last year. I'm a big fan of Randall because of his coverage ability. Obviously, he has problems tackling, but you don't draft a guy like that because he's a great tackler. You draft him because he can play center field, because he can cover slot receivers. And I think Demarius Randall can do that, and he can be productive, and he can make big plays. Is he going to get burned? Yeah, absolutely. He's going to give up some big plays too, but he's a gambler, and he really makes a lot of those gambles pay off. I like his game. I don't think he's a first-round pick, but I do think that safety is a big need for the Colts, and I could definitely see that being the pick right now, and that would make a lot of people cry.
What's going to happen with the Packers, Justice?
We're either gonna get a cornerback, and if we end up getting, I'm using the we on this one. Yeah, we're going there. If we get Marcus Peters, man, I'm tearing this whole thing down. We got Charles Woodson back. I'm so happy. We need some dogs. So I think they'll probably go corner. I mean, if a guy like Kevin Johnson's here, I think Kevin Johnson. I think this staff would be like, oh, there's Al Harris, and they'll just like roll with that. We talked about a guy like Eric Rowe. I mean, there's just so many corners that should be. There's going to be a corner run in the mid to late first round, and they're just all lined up in a way that Green Bay should be able to pick one of them if they like him. I have no idea. It also wouldn't surprise me if this was like a dark horse pick for a nose tackle, because both of their nose tackles, LaTroy Guion and B.J. Raji, are on one-year contracts for different reasons. I mean, Raji was moved to 3 technique and then moved back to 1 and then got hurt. And then Guion, got caught with like a loaded gun and then like a bunch of marijuana and like stacks. So I guess neither one of them or like the team wanted to invest very much into their future. And you got to remember, this is Ted Thompson, who had 4 defensive tackles and still drafted Justin Harrell in the first round at one point. So, like, if he sees a big body, he's going to be totally fine with taking a guy like Jordan Phillips, who has a back issue like Justin Harrell did. And I don't think the staff thinks that Justin Harrell failed because of him. I think they put that more on their trainers for rushing him back too early. So I can see him taking that as kind of like a redemption pick. Other than that, I mean, they're also kind of like a sleeper to take a guy like Melvin Gordon, oddly enough, because I think they'll try to get another running back in this draft to parlay with Eddie Lacy, because with Eddie Lacy's aggressive running style, I don't know how much longer – I don't know if they want to give him a second contract, which is crazy to say because he's probably the second best young running back in the league behind Le'Veon Bell. But he also has that foot fusion. And if there's one thing that like anything's told us is like skill players with foot issues, like the last thing you want to deal with, because those pop up again, progressively. And then inside linebacker could be a place that they address, but just the way that they look at the inside linebacker position, it wouldn't surprise me if Denzel Perryman was their first inside linebacker ranked. And I don't know if you take Denzel Perryman in the first round. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it probably ends up being a cornerback, or it ends up being, like Phillips or Gordon, or I don't even know who the last guy I was talking about. But whoever it was, that's the guy.
Denzel Perryman. I'm going for Denzel Perryman just so I can see Justice have a coronary. So that's all I'm hoping for.
The thing is, the more linebackers that go off the board early, the more likely Eric Kendricks is going to go in the top 50, right? And then Justice loses his bet to Josh.
Hey, it's like 44.5, man. Eat the tweet. Hashtag eat the tweet. Still better than 2015. Still.
I don't think Eric Kendricks is a top 50 player, but what I think doesn't amount to a hill of beans.
Seattle has been tied to sorry, hold on. Green Beckham, sorry. I always get his name mixed up. Green Beckham, but is he going to be there at 63 when they actually pick? I mean, I know we're at 31, but they traded that pick to the Saints, and we talked about that with Eric Galko last week. Is he even going to be there when they pick? That seems like who they want, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, Justin?
I think, man, he should be there because I think it's ludicrous to spend a pick on a guy who has had so many off-the-field problems. You talking about a guy, we know what Green Beckham's, we know he's had a couple of marijuana arrests. We know that he was allegedly shoved a girl down some stairs. That he was never charged in that. There is some text message evidence will say that something went down that night. It was enough to get him kicked out of Missouri, which led to him not playing at all last year. So even if you can take his word for these situations that he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, that he really was guilty of no wrongdoing, which I seriously doubt, then you are talking about a player who has not played in game action in what's going to end up being like over a year, year and a half. So, I don't like the connection to Seattle. I think it's kind of just a throw spaghetti at the wall kind of thing. Like, oh, they take chances on guys. I don't think he's as great of an athlete as people thought. At least he didn't test like one. Maybe some of that's rust, but I don't like, I think, let me say this. I think he will still be there. I don't think Seattle will pick him.
Shouts to all the people who are like mocking him to like the Baltimore Ravens, because that is like no way that can happen. Like
Not gonna
that
happen.
is something that like Goodell probably has made a phone call and be like, you guys aren't gonna pull that shit, right? Like even when the Dallas Cowboys boards leaked after the Josh Brent thing, like Alec Ogletree was completely off their board. Teams are at least self-aware enough where they won't take a risk when the whole media is already like looking over them. The Ravens were a couple like, I mean, if they didn't blow that game against the Patriots, they probably were in the Super Bowl. And all you think about when you talk about this Ravens last season is Ray Rice. And when you have a situation like that, like the last thing you could do is take a guy like Dorial Green Beckham. Like he can't be on the board.
They're not taking Green Beckham, and they're not taking Frank Clark. I can almost guarantee that this year. And I kind of think that there's more trepidation throughout the entire league about those two players than what we're hearing in the media. That's just a hunch that I have. Some people that I've talked to still say that they're both going to be third, fourth round picks at worst. But I just think that when the chips are on the table, that there's more fear about and more worries about PR issues about those two players than we're hearing about in the media. There's always players that slip that are kind of surprising to us. And if those players slipped farther than we think, I won't be surprised.
The Patriots are going to make a good pick, right? Like that's kind of the consensus at this point is that they'll get the best of whoever falls.
They'll pick a player that's got a torn ACL and redshirt him, probably.
That was last year.
Oh,
Ben Easley, I still believe.
We think that it's coming down to like Shaq Thompson, like that's the popular name right now. That Ethan Hammerman's been on that for a while. I've seen some wide receivers mocked there. I don't know, like they haven't taken a wide receiver high since
like Grady Jarrett and Michael Bennett. But the problem to me is like, all right, so you have them and you have Dominic Easley. How are you going to get them on the field at the same time? Because neither one of those guys is going to play one tech.
Unless they think that Easley's knees are shot after a year of him, not being able to get on the field. So that I saw that too, and that made me that kind of raised an eyebrow for me too. But that was the kind of explanation I came up with in my head was if they think that I like Michael Bennett. I know Justice and I have talked him up on this show, but if they were to take a guy like that with the last pick in the first round, to me that says we're not sure that Dominic Easley is ever going to be the player we thought he was when we picked him last year.
Do you guys want to drop some hot takes, or is it? I think we're at like an hour and 10 or 15. Do you want to call this real quick?
Well, let's see. I know that I got one hot take earlier that I wanted to address real quick. So let me just find this real quick. But no, we talked about that one. That was the Atlanta with going to the Falcons at 8. That was something that we talked about with Parsons, and we talked about. I asked him if Gurley was there in the second round, if Atlanta would pull the trigger, and he said yes. I don't think either one of us or any of us thought that it would come down to him at the 8th pick. So other than that,
Dupree, Dupree for like big draft, he's caught on a lot. I mean, what people kind of had Ray as, like Dupree now, like I feel pretty confident that's who the Jets are picking. Like with like 80% confidence, like that's kind of the guy. So because he was off the board, Now it's like, all right, maybe an edge rusher won't be there for Atlanta, and I think that has a lot to do with it.
That and Gregory's,
Right.
issues. So.
What about you, Justice? You have any hot takes from the last
Man,
week?
I think we burnt them all. Like, I was pretty exhausted off these hot takes after just seeing that Vic Beasley thing, man.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate it. And next week we're gonna burn the timeline down and make our boss John Ames mad as we do our once a year mock draft and piss everybody off and we'll see how it works out. Hopefully we don't make too many people mad. All I know is I'm gonna try to make the Chiefs fans mad. I'm gonna set it up so I get that 18th pick.
As long as we tweet each pick with a long hashtag, that shouldn't make anybody upset. Because I know that people love the mock drafts across their timeline. If I know anything about Twitter, it's that.
All right, Justice. Thanks, man. Go back to your grow house. And Justin, have a good night.
Thank you, guys. And always remember to subscribe to Draft Savages on iTunes. Give us a review. Let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. And as always, thanks everybody for listening to us each week. It's really a pleasure to do the show.
It's a damn Christmas tree.
It is a Christmas tree. He's growing Christmas trees, folks.
I didn't say what you were growing. I just said you were in a grow house. All right, guys. See ya.
Good night, everybody.